Hey everybody, Scout Crafty here again, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. You made it through another week. And we have a little bit of a different show today. It's geared mostly towards the newer subscriber, people, and welcome to you if you've just recently subscribed, and people that are just getting into the hobby. We're going to show you the very simple basics of restoring a tool. And we're going to pick a very simple tool, which is what we try and do here, is pick non-collectible tools and make them collectible. We try and shy away from trying to restore anything that is a collectible tool. But you can have so much fun with just taking any old pair of plain pliers or screwdrivers or anything like that and just bringing them back to, or better than new if you can. And so today we're going to be working with a tire spoon. But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about a friend of the show, and we'll get to that right now. Now, a good friend of the show by the name of Alex Schoenberg just picked up a nice master lock. It was a warded type, and here is the lock that he picked up. And he sent me pictures of it. He's all excited he got this lock, and it's a beautiful lock. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this type of lock because, as you know, I do collect master locks. I'm a big fan of it. In 1921, Harry Soroff was the inventor of this type of lock that uses laminated steel. The first type of lock he did invent was the warded type that Alex just picked up. Now, the warded type has long since been kind of replaced by the pin type lock, the pin type tumbler, because it's harder to pick. But remember, again, locks are made to keep out honest people, and I'll go more into that in the future. But what's interesting is these locks here, you could see the warded lock was indicative of this little zigzag on the bottom here, and it uses this type of key. Now, unlike a pinned lock, how a warded lock works is that there's wards or stoppages in there that the key has to go in. And if you were to grind all these off and just leave the two at the tip, that's how you make a master key for these, and that's why they kind of been replaced. However, what was really good about these warded type locks is that they were made to stand extreme elements such as sand and snow and ice and things like that. So these really perform well in harsh conditions, and that's why they were popular for so long. This is a master lock display, the hardware store display, more or less, you would see from about the 60s or 70s, and it might even go back as far as the 50s. I don't know, but I know that this is later on, before they went to the pin, because every one of these locks are warded. Even this little cute guy down here, look at this little one here. He's just a little, and look at the key it uses, But you could see it at the price range. That was one thing about Master Lock, is that they were available to people because they were inexpensive. They were very strong, well-built locks, and they performed. Remember, in any kind of weather, you go out there and just imagine going out to your garage to get out, and you got to get your car out of something. You go to try to lock, and the thing is frozen. You can't get in. These locks were dependable. Now, I know that today with the lock picking community, they always they're down on this. But again, remember, only 1%, less than 1% of all break-ins are picked. They're always, they use either a whizzer wheel or a bolt cutters or something. So picking locks is, it's fun, but, thieves don't take the time to pick locks. Anyway, I always thought these were interesting because they would be in hardware stores and stuff, and you could see the prices here. This one here was $10.49. Now, it's funny because the prices of locks have stayed pretty much the same. Locks were expensive back in the 70s and 80s. They weren't, when you look back at some things, you say, wow, locks were always kind of expensive because they were an intricate design, but Master was always cheaper than a lot of other locks. And I always thought this was an interesting little display. And I have a couple other Master Locks display. One thing about Master Lock is they always had fantastic displays, all kinds of hardware store displays and things like that. When you walked into a hardware store, they wanted to get your attention. He was smart like that. Harry Soroff was a genius. The best thing about those locks is they clean up so nice because they're all steel, and with a wire brush, you can use Scotch-Brite pad, you can use steel wool, anything. They clean up so nice, and they work. They're good forever. It's really a nice thing to collect and a lot of fun. And I hope, Alex, you send us some pictures after you wire brush or restored it a little bit, and I'll put them up on the on one of the videos. Next up, I have a tool here kind of a simple tool, but one of my favorites. Let's go check it out. You couldn't be more simpler of a tool than this is here. It's basically a piece of steel that's formed into a spoon, a tire spoon. I got this with a lot of tools. You could see here it's all rusty and stuff, but I figured this would be a good chance for some of the new subscribers to see exactly how we go through this process real quick. The first thing we do normally is we wire brush it to see if there's any markings on there. So let's do that. Okay, here we are, post wire brush evaluation, and it still looks like poop. You know, it's just with less orange on it. Now, we did this because that's the first step you do, just in case there's some kind of name on there that you might want to keep. But here we have free reign to go nuts because there's no name, there's nothing on it. This is going to be a great project. Now, I want you to look at these pits. You see how deep they are and everything, you know. And a lot of people were saying, you know what you should do? You should weigh it before to see how much weight you have to take off. And, you know, that's a good idea. Now, we already took some of that off, but that was just a powdery stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how much steel we actually take this off this. We're going to weigh it. Okay, here we are. We're set with grams to begin with. We're going to place the item across here. And you can see we have 246 grams, or that would be 8.7 ounces. Let's see how much we take. Now, a lot of people are wondering right now, why wouldn't you just put this in Evaporust or vinegar or something like that? Because when you have rust that has this kind of pitting, you're going to have to take it down anyway. So it's kind of a waste of a step. Now, this, however, this kind of rust, you see that? This is the kind of rust where you would use Evaporust or something like that, because first of all, you want to get in all the areas and stuff, and it'll give you a good head start. So when you have that kind of outside surface rust, this is what you want to use Evaporust for. When you have the pitting and the deep, you know, you're gonna have to grind it anyway. So don't waste. I can't tell you how many times people say, "What grit do you use?" Well, we're going to start with a brand new 60 grit. Okay, this is very coarse. However, this here is a 40 grit, but it's worn. So this is going to behave like about 100 grit. You know what I mean? So I save all my worn discs, and what I do is after I do the initial, it's going to leave a lot of scratches at 60. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, which one feels like I want to go next? You know, just feel it with your thumb and say, okay, this one here is a good one. We'll go with this. And then that's how I do it, you know. But and then when you get down to the finer grit, you know, then we'll do a different. Here we're just simply clamping it here. Now, if this was something that was a little bit flexible, I would put a small board under it to give it some support, but this is very stiff. The other thing is that you'll see if you're using a worn disc, one thing you could tell if it's starting to get too hot, the disc is too worn, you should really get rid, you know, that's what you got to be careful of. But being that this is a brand new disc, it shouldn't get hot very quick. It'll take off all this. Now this is less than 1 minute, and you could see now, you could see the extensive pitting that we have there, and you could also see that those scrape marks that we're getting from that coarse disc. So you could see we have to keep going. You have to keep going, and you could see obviously what it was like before. But you know, this is you start to get a little bit iffy. You say, I don't want to take off too much metal. You're not taking off of it. Okay, that was an additional 3 minutes, and you can see the pits are now all gone, but we have a lot of scratches from that disc, that heavy disc that we're using. But now we're going to do the whole wrench. Going to do the whole wrench and get it nice, and then we'll address it with a finer disc. Now this segment is purposely done at normal speed. It's not sped up or slowed down. And see, this is the way it looks when you're doing it. Now, first of all, if you notice, I'm doing a circular motion on the disc, and I do that because it helps expose different parts of the fresh disc to the area, and it also levels out the area. You got to be careful when you're doing any kind of disc surfacing, because you can easily dig little divots and depressions in whatever you're working on. So you always want to have a very light touch and go back and forth, and don't stay in one spot too long. You know, work it down, and you'll see me constantly going back and forth. And it's hard to see when I'm doing it at double or triple speed, which I normally do it at to show you to save time. But this is actual time and what it looks like and how long it takes to get rid of those pits. It doesn't take long, but you just have to be cautious, and you don't want to stay in one area too long, or else it'll start to look wavy, and you don't want that look. So just keep a light touch back and forth, up and down, and a circular motion really helps. Now here's an example of the same disc. One is worn and one is new. You can see the scratches, the new one left. Okay, here we ran down a lot of the belts on here, and now we have it to a nice finish here, right? Look at that. That's a pretty nice finish, right? But what we want to do is, they got those micro scratches in there. You see them? And we want to get these out of there. And what we'll do is we'll take the fiber wheel, and we'll go over it with the fiber wheel. That'll blend in. It will dull it out a little bit as far as the satin finish. You know, you won't get that quite the same mirror, but it does look more pleasing at the end. So let's go to the fiber wheel. This is post fiber wheel. You see how it took out all those small scratches, kind of blended in, but it's not quite mirror like it was before. But this is what we like our tools kind of to look like. Don't show up fingerprints and whatnot. Now we're going to take it to polish, only because that puts a really good protective coat on there. So let's do that. Now, last up, after we polished it out, we apply a coat of Mother's California Gold Carnauba Cleaner Wax, okay? And cleaner wax has a little bit of cleaner in there, like a compound. Smell that? Ah, that smells so good. Anyway, take a little bit of this here. We apply it here. Let that dry. See that? Just wipe it on. Let it dry, and I'll show you why that's an important step. Now you know my favorite part. Remember what this old tire spoon looked like before we started. And we're calling this project done. Let's take a look at how this looks now. Now, there's nobody else on the internet could have spent 2.5 hours on a tire spoon. Trust me on this. But you want to see one done, especially if you have an appreciation for these. Now, remember, we had to take away some of the mirror shine because of the satin wheel. But look at that. Isn't that just a beautiful tool now? Back to its original glory. The tip is all nice. Made sure you can't thin that tip out too much. And this is, you know, how these work. Anybody that's done a tire before, these are a godsend. And the back here, you did this up real nice, because this is the part you're going to be holding. And sometimes on a heavy tie, you might have to put this side in. And let's take and weigh it now. Okay, if you remember before, it weighed in at 246 grams. Let's see what it weighs in at now. 216 grams. So we took off 30 grams of steel. 30 grams. We'll flip it over to ounces. You could see it was, now it's down to 7.5 ounce, 7.6. So we took off a substantial amount of rust and pitting and metal to get down to the way this looks now. Lastly, I'm often asked, what do I do to protect the tools from rusting and stuff? And let me tell you, when you finish a tool like I just did here, and let me show you what happens. We're going to put this in, immerse it in water, okay? I'm immersing this in water here. You can see, okay? Now watch what happens. Look at that. Couple beads of water. You could flip them off. Look at that. It's almost dry to the touch, you know, because there's nowhere for the water to really hang on there and get all to start rusting. So that's the reason that my tools stay rust-free, more or less, in an environment here. Look at that, very little beading. Just it's bone dry over here and over here, but just a little bit of water here. And again, you could flip that off or wipe it off with your hand, and you don't have to worry. But it's when you have tools that stay saturated, that's the ones that rust and stuff, that there's no protective coating. So that's all you really need on here. You know, that Mother's wax, that Mother's Cleaner wax is fantastic, and this will stay in my drawer for years and look exactly the same way. In closing, we were able to take that to a nice presentation piece now for a tire spoon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for tuning in. Have a great weekend. Take care now. Bye-bye. Now, I know what you're thinking. How much is 30 grams? How much metal actually is that? Okay, see this eye bolt here with the nut. Okay, place it over here. 30 grams. That's how much metal that we took off of that tire spoon. Okay, in weight-wise. So think about that for a moment.